Well, I have to tell you, it just, well, I mean, I want to start off this way and just say it's just an absolute miracle to be here, of all places in the world, at the Clinton School of Public Service. If this was a year and a half ago, I would not be able to stand here and speak to you. I just want to say also that, Patrick, you said it was Lee's book, and then afterwards it was my book. Well, thank you anyway. But you know that my wife, Lee, actually wrote at least 3/4 of this book. We wrote this book for two different reasons. She wrote while I'm still in a coma because she needed to do what she'd always done, where she likes to write. And this is the way she deals with her suffering. And I started writing it much later once I got my language back, and I did it so that I could recover by doing this that way. So we wrote this book together. It has been a long time since I've been through here, because speaking of Lee, by the way, she's gold friend with Ann Dorn, who arranged this. And her son is here as well, who made this all possible for me to get here. I just want to thank you so much. She was actually back working with Lee when we returned from Tiananmen Square back in 1989. And it's been a long time since I saw you, but it's just great to see you. And just to get back here in Arkansas, I mean, we know that this race now is pretty big, isn't it? You know, this is so strange for me to not be covering the election this year, as I've done so many times before, but here I am in Arkansas, where 2 out of the 4 are from here. Where are my colleagues, huh, that are covering this? But I want to tell you that this is, for me, in an instant, a change in our life significantly. And I just want to explain to you what exactly happened to us that January 29th, 2006. We had gone over to Iraq to report on what the U.S. military was doing in terms of passing over power to the other Iraqi military. And we were going down a road where they'd already checked out earlier to see if there was any possibility of explosion of IED out there. And as we were driving down this road, we had no idea, but about 20 feet that way, me and Doug Vogt, my cameraman, were literally almost, in fact, standing about like this out of a tank. So I was protected from here down below. But up here, we had body protections on, we had helmets on. And literally, where you're standing, Ann, right there, is about the distance from where the IED exploded, probably about 20 feet away. And down low in the sand, buried in the sand with rocks around them. And what happens in these explosions, this is a 155 millimeter IED. And when this thing blew up, the air blast hit us first and knocked us out, wiped out our cameras, our video at that time, so we don't have any pictures of anything flying past it. You could see the camera in one position, and then it just kind of collapsed as it got knocked out by the air blast. Following the air was the rocks that then were also surrounding this, that were placed there on by the ones that set this off, and then followed by sand after that. It's only hard to believe, just, I'm thinking about this right now, January 29th just passed about a week and a half ago. That was 2 years. We call it My Alive Day, and Doug's Alive Day. No one else in the military was killed in that particular attack with us. One of the Iraqi driver got his fingers blasted up pretty badly, but the rest of us absolutely survived. But I'll tell you what happened after that. Once we were hit, I was knocked out. Doug was right to my right. He was hit and was bleeding, and he collapsed on top of the tank. He was pulled then inside by my producer and my sound man that was inside underneath the tank. Brought them into the vehicle together with Omar, who is our translator, an Iraqi who's a translator, who, by the way, we got him into the United States about 4 months ago. So as I then fell through this hole, I was knocked out for 1 minute. And in that 1 minute, I can see my body floating beneath me, underneath me, and I could see whiteness around me, and there was no pain, and there really was no fear. After about 1 minute, then I woke up, and at that moment I was inside the tank, and I looked around and I saw Vinny Malhotra, my producer, and I saw Doug Vogt, my cameraman, and I saw Doug blood coming down his face right over here, and I said to him, I said, "Are we alive?" And Vinny said, "We are alive. We are alive." At that very moment, they had to we noticed, not me, I still don't have any memories after that. It's the last I really can remember at all. But I was told that then there was gunfire out in the front and in the back, where the ones that attacked us were now trying to shoot, as all of the military guys, the Iraqis and the Americans, the Army, the 4th Infantry, all came out to then protect the vehicle that we were in. They then returned the fires, and we don't know exactly what happened to those who were firing back. But that moment, they had to get us out of that tank in a vehicle, take us a mile down the road to where the helicopters are then going to fly in and take us out. What I learned about 4 months after this, when I had woken and been in contact with so many of these guys that I've become close friends with, is that the 2 pilots that were in that helicopter were flying in, and they were told by a commander over the radio, "Don't land down there, it's dangerous, there's gunfires." They turned down the radio, they ignored that, and came down and saved our lives. I don't know how many of you have served the country in the military, but how many here have actually served in the military? Just raise your hands. So the amazing thing is, from there, once we finally got in this helicopter, they flew us down to Baghdad. In Baghdad, we got down to the doctors, the medics that were down there, and they looked at me and they looked at Doug, and Doug was doing okay. He was awake now, but he obviously needs some medical tests done on his head to see what his brain was doing. But with me, they thought I was going to die. So they put us in another helicopter and took us up to Balad, where all the remarkable doctors are serving in Iraq. And that was within 37 minutes of that explosion. 2 helicopters, 2 cities within that country, and I was in front of the medical nurses and doctors and medics right there with helmets on, body protections, doing surgery. And within 2 hours after that explosion, they removed 14 centimeters of my skull over here, which was off for 4 months because my brain was expanding. And if they did not do that, then my brain may not function properly again. And they got that out. At that very moment, the news was now starting to spread around the country that this had happened. To remind you again that those helicopters, by the way, did not know who we were. They assumed we were someone. They didn't know if we were Iraqi military, American military. They had no idea there was a U.S. reporter team out there at all, and that's what they did. But anyway, as this news is now spreading, believe it or not, my wife was with my little kids on vacation at the Disney World in Orlando. At this company that I work for, they happened to be down there at the Walt Disney Group. And she was getting a call then at 7 o'clock in the morning. And it was a phone call. She was woken up by the phone. She picks it up, and someone says, "Lee." She said, "I don't want to wake up yet. I think it's a wake-up call." She goes, it's David Weston, who's the boss of the chief of ABC News. And he said, "I got to tell you something, that Bob is hurt. We don't know exactly what's happened to him. Doug is also down. We don't know exactly what's happening to them." So she had to walk out of the room, and all the kids remained asleep, walked around in circles outside trying to figure out what she was going to do, making phone calls to as many people as she possibly could to figure out what to do, and decided then that she was going to fly over to Langstuhl with my brother, with my brother-in-law, and also Melanie Bloom, whose husband, David Bloom from NBC, had died in the invasion, where we were about 12 miles away from each other back in 2003. And she, because Lee had done for her after her husband was lost, that she wanted to return the same thing and be with Lee, because they were best friends, and we were best friends for so many years. They flew over to Langstuhl and then had to come into the room where then I was finally there. I was flown very quickly after the surgery in Balad out of Iraq into Langstuhl. And then my wife, my brother walked in to see me, and they could see that my brain was coming out of my skull like this, all the way over to there. And to this very day, I just don't know exactly what they were quite going through. I mean, we've had a lot of conversations about it, but they were just remarkable. My little children did not see me until I came back to Bethesda Naval, which again, I was getting this remarkable military medical help there. What had happened is all these rocks had also entered into this side of my jaw and my face, in my neck. It had shattered the scapula in the back, right here. That's triangular bone, and you've got it back there. Smashed that completely. Somehow, all those rocks stopped and didn't go through my heart. To this day, I still don't know why. These other rocks went over here. One of them is still actually sitting right in here in my jaw down here. Another rock about the size of a small marble went all the way through this to the other side, 1 millimeter from the vein on the other side. Artery, right for the artery on this other side. Doctors still couldn't believe how this is possible. There's 1 more millimeter and I would have died in no time at all. But as I was going through this, I was now in a coma from January 29th all the way through March 6th. This was 36 days that I was out. My poor family my friends, in fact, my friends surrounded me down there. They traveled. My parents flew in, my wife's parents, her sisters, my brothers, their wives, her sisters, husbands, my friends, they all came down and saw me, and all this time didn't know what was going to happen. Was I going to even wake up? Was I going to be able to speak again? Will I be able to walk again? And this is what everybody has to go through. But there was really no reaction from me as they tried to get me to wake up. I would kick, but I would never react. I would never really see. Until about 2 weeks before I woke up, there was a moment where my little daughter, Catherine, and she and I had been for years having things called kissing contests. When I would go and cover these wars, I would always have to have these phone calls on my cell with my kids, and one of the things I used to do with Catherine, we would have this contest with who could kiss the longest without getting another breath. So we go, and of course I'd always let her win. I would run out of air right away, but she'd always win that. But anyway, she came up to me in the hospital, and she wanted to have one kissing contest, and apparently this is the first time she gave me a little kissing contest and came over and kissed me on the side of my face, and apparently a tear came down out of my eye, which kind of tells you that maybe I was paying attention a little bit to what was happening around me, but it's hard to tell. But then I finally woke up, and Lee walks in at about 7 o'clock in the morning. I've been finally awake for 3 hours on March 6th. And I said, honey, where have you been? And part of her, 95% of her wanted to hug me and love me. 5% wanted to strangle me. For all of these days, she'd been coming in and wiping my feet and cleaning me and rubbing me and trying to make me wake up. And I think... and now I'm criticizing her for being 3 hours late. And nobody really can believe I can speak, but I have to tell you that the way that I could speak then was a completely different sound that you're hearing right now. I could not really remember any names of any state in this country. Arkansas, forget about it. It'd take probably about 4 months before I could even notice Arkansas, and that's not because this is Arkansas. I couldn't even name New York, where I was living. I could not name Michigan, which I'd grown up in. I couldn't even tell you the name of a single country in this world, probably for, I would say, probably a month and a half. I could not remember anything. Basically what happens in this situation is the neurons inside your brain, when there's a big shaking around of the brain, almost none of us have known about this before, unless there's probably some people out here that have gone through this kind of traumatic brain injury. I never knew about it before, but what happens is, because of those explosions, I was obvious that I had traumatic brain injury because they had to remove part of my skull, and it was obvious. There's a lot of guys that are hit by explosions, and sometimes you don't know. There's people in this country, about 1.4 million every year, that have traumatic brain injury. Sometimes it's from being beaten up, from being hit by a criminal. You might be hit by a baseball bat. You might have hit in a car crash, or just fallen down for some reason or off your roof. And this is happening in this country, but what happens is the neurons are separated. It's almost like, imagine your fingers like this, and suddenly they split, and then they're twisted. Now, over time, they start to come back. I'm getting that now, and it's every day there's an improvement. Sometimes the insurers say that's up to 2 years of recovery, but you know what? I say that's BS. This is over a long period of time where you get better and better. What I explain it to a lot of people is what's happening to my brain is doctors have said it's almost as if you're working in an office and you've got a cabinet full of files. And in those files are papers, and suddenly there's an explosion in that office, and these papers fly out the broken windows and come landing on the street outside. And so you need to go down, and you need to study now. You need to start working that brain back. You need to go back and pick up those papers and go back on the stairs and walk back up and put them back in the files in the cabinets, and then you'll have them back. But the thing that's also happening is that some of those papers, for some reason, are just flying off the street into the window itself. And we don't know exactly why. Some of these words are coming back to me over time, and I can't really figure exactly which ones, and sometimes I can't remember, which is also a difficulty for me to do sometimes live reporting. I'm doing in-depth story because I understand things perfectly. I can think about things, and I understand things, but sometimes I can't come up with the words. And the way that I explain it to you is, it's almost like when you think you have many synonyms. So when you want to make a sentence, let's just say you got about 5 points you want to make in a sentence. Let's just say a noun, a verb, an adjective, those three. And you know 3 different ways. You know street, highway, road, okay? In the beginning, after I woke up, I didn't know any of those words. Then over time, I would get one back. Oh, street, yeah, that's what it is, that thing where the car thingies go around. Yeah, road. And so then I would sort of get those back. So maybe on some of those points, I've got 3 synonyms back. Sometimes I've still only got 1. Maybe I've got 2 on this one. So if that kind of thing, I can still fake my way through it, and I can still speak, as long as I grab one of those words. The difficult ones are names, because people only have one name. You know, it took me so long to remember the Clintons' name. I couldn't remember George Bush. I don't even know why I remembered Ahmadinejad. But I couldn't remember George Bush. I couldn't remember Bill Clinton. I could remember any of these names. And then over time, some of these words have been coming back. Some people, tell a lot of these military guys that have also been hurt, or people with TBI, you look great. You sound good to me. Just remember, part of it is that faking. But the bigger thing for me, of course, having done what Patrick explained to you, that I was an anchor for 27 days. Before that, I was doing tons of live reporting. It's a little bit different, what's happened to me. It's almost like I explained, if you're a military, like you're a soldier, Marine, and you go into this war, and you come back and you've got an injury, and people say, well, that's not so bad. Well, you lost 2 fingers. So 2 fingers got blown off, 2 fingers got cut off. That's not a big deal. But what? You were a concert pianist before you went to that war. Then what are you going to do? What are you going to do when you come back with your life? And that is certainly one of the things we have to think about. One of the major points that I've been trying to do, along with my wife, Lee, my brothers are also board members of this foundation that we got, to try to help these families within the military for this kind of long recovery. This is a completely different war in a really significant way. In Vietnam, so many people were killed. 57,000 soldiers and Marines were killed in the war. Here we got about 4,000 in this war. But in Vietnam, it was about 2.7 to 1 injured versus those who passed away. In this war, you got at least 16 to 1. Not 2.7 to 1, 16 to 1 at least. And so this is long-term recovery. We're trying to help as many of these families to get long-term recovery help that they need when they've left the ICU hospitals that are remarkable. The Bethesda Naval I went through was really incredible. And a lot of the people that are in this war are from the South, from the countryside. You walk around Manhattan, you don't see many where I live right now. But certainly down in the South and certainly outside in the country, you see a lot more. And you just need to help them over time. Because in terms of the long term, eventually this war will be over. There's no question. What these guys have done is just absolutely remarkable. The people that I know, the friends that I know in the military, we just have to applaud what they have been able to do. And what's happening now, I think, after this war is over, what's going to be in the future what's called an asymmetrical war. This has really changed, and this is exactly what happened to me. We were in a developed, well-advanced tank, although this one, in fact, was actually an Iraqi one they got from the Soviet Union, but it's actually not that advanced. But these kinds of protections are quite different. But what happened is we were in a very good protection, surrounded by guys with remarkable weapons and guns, and helmets were good, body protection was good, but we were hit by a little tiny IED that somebody put up as a different kind of enemy. And that's what we're talking about, asymmetrical wars. Most of them are going to be like that. The ones that are jets against jets and tanks against tanks and soldiers, like World War II, or fighting against Japan, or fighting against, even Egypt in 1967. Whatever the war might be going on in the past, those were symmetrical wars. And now they're asymmetrical wars. And we're going to have, that means, is we're going to have these kinds of injuries that I've been talking about for a long period of time, even when the war is over. And certainly studying something like traumatic brain injury is something that the country needs to do more and more, because it's happening so much to people here. There's a word. People that are not military here in the country. What is it? There you go. It's happening, right here in this country. And I have to tell you that recovering depends partly about who's around you, what kind of doctors and help that you get, where you are. Our strong beliefs is that if you're injured and you've gone to the ICU and your family had to move for months as you recover from an injury, that you should be able to go back to your house, to the best hospital near you that can work on your TBI and help your thing over years, and not necessarily have to drive 3 hours away. I mean, some of the friends that I have that have been through the war have come back and they've got major problems. They have to drive 3 hours to get to the VA because it's the only thing they've been allowed to do. Now, there's been some cutaways on this. Some people have been made exceptions to this, but it's happened a lot, and I think that's got to be something that's got to change, and that's one of the things we're working on. We're also trying to get those families that need to go spend time with their kids, their children, their husbands, their wives, their uncles, whatever might be injured, and help them go to the hospital where they are. It's something we'd like to do. I have to tell you just in terms of humor for a second, because I think about my wife during all of this. I think you probably wish you had her here. She's a hell of a lot more interesting than me. And she's a lot more beautiful, and she's really funny. But anyway, while I was recovering and trying to get back some of the words, I would have these fights over the words that I was going to try to use. And there was one day when I was telling her that the phone is not working, and we got Verizon. And I didn't know what the word Verizon was, but I just said to her, I said, honey, there's something's wrong with this phone. She goes, what's the matter? I said, can we call the guy from Viagra? I got to fix this thing. Which I think, explains a little bit what I think, probably, generally. There was a moment when I went back to Michigan. I grew up in the Detroit area, and I went back and visited a bunch of my friends from high school not too long while I was in recovery, and I was able to go back and see my parents and my brothers and see them. And one of my good friends from high school, she had an enlargement here. And I noticed it anyway, so I called Lee, and I said, it's not believable. I saw, I'm not even telling you the name. I saw, let's call her Sue. I saw Sue, and I said, she had those, I think she's got, one of those breast explosions. So that is what we were working through together. And so my poor wife had to hook up with me all this time. But I have to say, to this very day, I think this has been a real mixture of luck and faith for us to get through this. For the families that we know, I have seen recovery, sometimes fast, sometimes slow. But to spend times with the people that have gone through this has been so moving to me. We're going to continue to do that for the rest of our lives. We're going to continue to work on the foundation that we started. If you see, we got our book is coming out in soft paperback next week, and you'll see there's a little bit from my little girls and my son. I do have a son and 3 daughters, and they all wrote their little piece about what they went through at the end of that, and it's pretty moving. But I just want to say that it is an honor to be back and speak to such a remarkable place like this, to come back. My wife's grandparents are actually from Pine Bluff. Her grandfather died about 2 years ago, the Andersons, but Nola, her grandmother, is still down there. And it's rare that I've been able to come back here to the Capitol, but I have been through Pine Bluff, and I can often smell it. Which reminds me of places that I grew up as well, and a lot of it's beautiful, and they have a cotton farm down there that they now have someone else working on it. But just to come back to the state, my grandfather actually grew up in Tennessee, and he had no money. He came up barefooted back in the early 1910s to work in the car business, to try to start sweeping the floors up there in Detroit, and that's how we ended up in Michigan. So we would have started out as a family from Arkansas and Tennessee. So it's just an honor to get back here, and I just want to say thank you very much for having us. And I know you might have some questions, but I want to say thank you. Thank you very much.
It's time for a few questions. We have, I believe, 3 mics, one over here, one over there, one over there. Please raise your hand, and Bob, Tina, they'll pass around the mics.
I can hear you. You know, I have not gone, you know, it's kind of interesting. You know, Walter Reed has gotten all this news, which of course is not also VA. People that, what happened with, out of Bethesda Naval, it's really mostly the surgery kind of level. And once you're done with Bethesda Naval, then you go off to either the VA or you got TRICARE coverage where then you can go to another doctor. So I've not been able to go to the VA. I've talked to tons of people that through the VA, and there is just remarkable people that are working the VA. We've had others that have complained because they have not been able to really get those that really know a lot about what they're suffering from. And the one I'm talking about is TBI, because that is still a relatively new one for the VA. The VA has been dealing with, you know, gunfires, bullets that pierce through bodies and heads and feet and arms and legs that have been cut off and so on for previous wars. Now there's relatively in this war a new kind of injury. And TBI was not very well known before this war happened. And I think a lot of people actually learned about it once we started doing reporting on it as well. I mean, it's kind of strange to say, but it's true. And I think that people that are within the VA, over time, they're getting better and better at it. That is absolutely true. But I think until its perfection, my biggest argument is people that are injured with something like that needs recovery quickly in the first few days, a few years. And let's not waste any time training within one particular group when other ones that have been doing this domestically in the country for years, to allow them to go there now until the VA figures it out. But I just want to say a lot of great VA and still a lot of troubles with VA.
Over there. Yeah.
You know, I'm not doing any that kind of libel. What do you call it again? Lobbying, right? I say libel. Lobbying. I am not doing lobbying. I have a job that's very mixed right now. You know, I'm a journalist, and I can't do that kind of lobbying. My brother's done some of that. My wife is doing a little bit of that, but I'm not doing that. But certainly, you know, but all I'm interested in is just making sure that we tell the story of those that are injured and what they need to be told so that everybody understands it. Because that's the other thing about this country right now is, you know, we only have about 1.75 million people that are in this war. So most people don't know them. You know, and certainly those who have been injured just go and see other military families where they've been, or not other people. You know, there was 16 million in Vietnam, 16 million in World War II. Now there's only 1.75 million in this one, so there's not many people know them. So I think that what we need to do is tell more stories about them, and that's certainly me as a journalist is what my job is.
Over there, wait for the mic, please.
Simple question first. Are you up to global questions?
Global?
Yeah.
Sure. You mean about the world?
Yeah.
Well, let's see, I just got back from Angola, from China, Cambodia, Brazil, and also I just got back from Sudan and Darfur. So and I'm about to go to North Korea.
Well, I wanted to make sure they were working properly before I posed the question. So, did you read the article a couple of weeks ago in the New York Times Magazine about the declining influence of U.S. in the global, in the world?
I did.
Okay. Take your experiences in and comment on that as for the agree or disagree. And also then, just last week, the Korean ambassador that was here said that the U.S. is no longer the #1 trade partner with them. China is.
Yeah. In fact, I was just, I've been to so many countries where we just have not had as much contact as other people. One of the stories I'm working on for the spring is an hour on China's globalization and China's expansion. China is now massive. I lived in China up through 1989, and I saw hardly any of my Chinese friends ever even thinking they were going to leave the country. Mostly the ambassadors and others were the ones in China that left that country. Now we went down to Angola, and the place was filled with Chinese working, rebuilding new roads, rebuilding new railroads. We just got back from Brazil. They're now buying a ton more soybeans out of that country. We were just in Cambodia, where the language is now being taught there much more than English now in Cambodia, now Chinese. I mean, China is spreading around the world. They are very, very possibly going to be our great friends. We got to figure out what we're going to do about this. China is growing, and that is just a very important question. And not only that, but in India as well. You know it's Brazil, India, China, and Russia are the two major big countries now in this world. And it's not going to be the United States running the place. It's going to be a group of others, Europe, China, and the United States, as you know from that article that you're reading. And I think we just have to study this and understand it. And the one thing I always tell people in America is we used to have the Atlantic Ocean on the east and the Pacific Ocean on the west so big we never left. We got to constantly leave. You know, they used to say that if you speak 3 languages, you're trilingual. If you speak 2 languages, you're bilingual. If you speak 1 language, you're American. Let's change that.
Bob?
I saw you on a talk show about a year ago when you first came back, and you made the mention that if you had had a different neurosurgeon than the one you had, you might not be there that day. Can you explain that? And is your foundation doing something to let the neurosurgeons around, especially the United States, know what the difference is?
Well, you know, it's hard for me. I mean, first of all, you know, the neurosurgeon that was, you know, Rocco Amanda was the amazing guy from the military, and we also Costantino, who's another private doctor, were both working on me. But Rocco is absolutely a remarkable guy. He's doing tons of these surgeries at Naval, Bethesda Naval. I don't really know who the very best are there. Would I have not survived to have a different doctor? I don't know. I know that they did incredible work, and there's great doctors that are doing this kind of work. I suppose you can get unlucky and get somebody who did not do it well, but I haven't really done an analysis of it. But I think most people are getting on that level. I think they're getting pretty good doctors. It's just the long-term recovery that I think needs to be improved.
Questions? Tina.
As a journalist, you're so used to covering the stories. What's it been like to be the story, and how has that affected your coverage of the news?
Well, I think what you're hearing from here tonight is probably the reason why I am okay doing it, because there's something I think I just want to tell people about, because it is rare that people have gone through this, rare people that have been able to tell exactly what they're going through with injuries in this war, and even here in this country if you get in a car crash. And I just think that's something I have the ability to tell people about, and if that leads to some improvement for some of those families that are going through this, I will just be happy. It is strange for a reporter to be asked questions by other reporters. That is absolutely true. And, you know, hopefully someday it won't happen anymore. But you guys are really good reporters, so anyway, but it's something my wife and I are going to be doing really absolutely for the rest of our lives.
Bob, go ahead.
I am a Vietnam veteran, and my brother-in-law is also a Vietnam veteran. As we were driving over here tonight, we were talking about going to the new PX at Camp Robinson in North Little Rock and looking at some of the small items and turning them upside down and noticing that many of them were made in Vietnam or made in China. This was at an Army base. I didn't think anything about that other than it's somewhat ironic that we're now buying from former enemies which leads me to my question. Since we have forces all over the world, why do we still have troops in Kosovo? Why do we have troops in South Korea? Why aren't we coming home? I was in Germany in the year 1970 as a soldier. Why are we still there?
Well, because I think if you read, there's actually in the cover of the New York Times today, there's an article about what the military is really now trying to turn into, is not so much the kind of very quick, the assumption in this war by so many that decided they wanted to go into this war was that this was going to last a week and a half, and then there'd be victory. And then after that, when we could pull out. Well, I think what everybody really completely understands now, and this again goes back to the point of asymmetrical war that I'm talking about, there's always going to be a small group of someone out there that wants to tear down a particular country. And perhaps the role of our military is not to be out there shooting and bombing, but to actually helping rebuild countries that need help. Otherwise, it would fall apart into a civil war. You know, having go through countries like Sudan, Angola that I just went to, Cambodia, the kind of things that who knows could have been prevented by some kind of other mission that was there well before there was a breakout of war. And I think there is a belief that maybe eventually that's what the military will be. Not for an instant victory over a quick attack of massive weapons, but maybe something else playing a role inside. It's almost like some have even explained it kind of as a growing type of Peace Corps. If that's the military doing, who knows, but it's really more Americans around the world understanding the countries and not just reading about it in a paper back in the United States and assuming you know everything about that country, but to spend time in it, know the people, the good ones and the bad ones, and try to see if we can prevent the kind of violence that's happened so far. That's what's being argued now by the military. But I tell you one thing about what we're working with these that have been injured in the war. What I don't want is whatever happened to the veterans after Vietnam.
I have a question here. Hello? Sorry. I was just wondering if your injury has affected your ability to speak Chinese fluently.
1989年我会说中国话，可是现在我忘了怎么说。It means I could speak in 1989, but lost most of it, in all that time. No, I lost a lot of my language. I used to speak, okay French a little bit, and my Chinese, even, I think you said it was a good level of Chinese. Well, it wasn't. I mean, I was working for CBS as a fixer, which means I would get the reporters around the town. I would interview with them. I translate for the reporters during Tiananmen Square. And I was able to do that, but it was pretty uncomplicated kind of Chinese. So I had it pretty well, and I've started to come back now. And the piece we're working on for the spring, I was able to go back and at least ask questions to some of these working in these various countries. 你是中国人吗? Sure Chinese, okay. All right, I'd say now it's hard for me to say. But, I've lost a lot of it. Don't ever test me on it, please.
I just want to tell you that my husband struggled with lung cancer last year, and you were an inspiration to him. The only thing he could do was be treated, but watching your story, he made an effort to stay up, even though he was dying to see that first thing. But my question is, I'm a writer, and was the writing therapeutic for you, or was it more of a challenge trying to come up with the words and things like that?
No, it was a major challenge. When my wife and I put this book together, I would sometimes scribble and write in the very beginning, and then she would look at it and then have a conversation with me, and then I'd rewrite again, and I rewrote and rewrote and rewrote. And certainly in the beginning, I would say that my ability to read was probably about 1/100th my speed that I originally had. Now I'm probably back to about 75% of what I used to be able to read. But my writing is now pretty much back. I need a thesaurus and a dictionary sometimes to pick up words I used to be able to pick up pretty quickly. But writing was the thing that really brought back so much. And I think it's helpful. If you've got somebody that's got some kind of brain injury, I think that it's actually a good thing to try to work on if you can.
Time for a couple more questions. Bob.
Hi, Bob. Yeah, hi, Bob. I'm a member of the U.S. Foreign Service. And in an instant, our lives changed in Harare, Zimbabwe, when my wife was stricken with a traumatic brain injury. After the evacuation, the State Department refused to accept responsibility for her recovery and turned it all over to our private insurance carrier, who only took care of 2 months of therapy that should have gone on for the rest of her life. It just seems that outside of the realm of the military, those suffering with traumatic brain injuries, the people that need therapy the most, actually get the least. Can you comment on the authority that private insurance carriers have on deciding who lives and who dies based on their own profits and balance sheets?
Yeah, you know, this is without question one of these arguments we've had exactly like you have for a long period of time. And this is not like what we've said from what happened with us, because we did have this remarkable thing where it's not just the military for us. We also had ABC News that stayed on with me. They've been remarkable. David Weston has been such a close friend. I had a family that was able to fly in and see me, and were able to get doctors, and you know, insurance was not a major issue for us. It is with so many people. And that's one of the wake-ups, I think, that a lot of people are getting out of this war, because it's raised more attention to TBI than you were able to get before by some kind of quiet, unnoticed injury that may have happened. And that's something I think that over time is now being proven as a different kind of injury. And I hope to God that it does help for you. I mean, we're concentrating on it, and I think right now a lot of our foundation now is concentrating on helping the families of the injured military. But it's going to be moving as this slows down and we go into an asymmetrical wars that are slower, that we'd move that much more towards TBI generally domestically in the country as well.
Over there, Andy.
Thank you. We know that we have a military force that is primarily volunteer, and many of the people that we have in service came from areas where that volunteering was based on an economic opportunity. As a result of that, we also know that the area from which they've come, education was not the best. How does the educational status of a person who has that kind of injury affect their rehabilitation, and the length of it in particular?
I think without question it's a challenge for sure, more so than it was with someone like me. Not only education that I've got and so many that I know, but also the fact that I'm older, which means that I've actually accomplished some things over my life, so that now at age 46, I could no longer really do much. I at least could look back and say that this is what I did and this is not a bad life. But to do this at age 21, we know that certainly more than 50% of those in the military are divorcing. That's one thing. The country is like that, but that's over 80 years. But now we're talking about 5 years during this war. You got 50% of divorce, which means there's this huge amount of stress. In the beginning of the war, we thought there was going to be serving for about 9 months overseas in the war, and then you come back and be for 24 months back at home. Now it's completely switched over. Now, sort of within the Army, now it's really more of spending 17 months in the war, come back for 9 months at home, and then go back again. So certainly that kind of stress of the mother of time you're spending overseas, without question. There's remarkable accomplishments that they've done, and there's a lot of guys that I know that actually improved from their previous life, some that had very poor background, and now they've got a life that they have now turned into more leaders. It's both of those stories. But certainly for those that are young and injured and uneducated, it's much harder to recover. I think that's true. And the other thing about education is we've got to fix the GI Bill. I mean, even my father was in the Army and during the Korean War, and he came back and got a GI Bill education at the University of Michigan. So I think that's definitely got to happen too.
One more question. Right? Oh, there you go.
I was just joking with Patrick behind that if you read the book, you see my wife actually wrote that we made love. Isn't she emotional? I would never write about that in a million years. But anyway, I love her even more now than I did before, so don't worry about the divorce. That's not coming.
We actually are selling books over here, so I'm signing them afterwards. Life's tough. All right.
Anyway.
All right, one more question. Any last questions? Bob, there's one right back here. No, hold on.
First, I would like to say to you that I consider you one of our miracle people, that you were spared for a reason. This morning when I saw the little baby that was found in the field in Tennessee, I thought the same thing, that God has spared him and there's something in the future for that child, as you have served so many people through your ordeal. The documentary that you did last year, there were two things that struck me so well. One was the dancing in the kitchen. I loved the dancing in the kitchen.
I'll do another dancing movie then. Okay.
The other one was the part with your children and the flashcards.
Yeah.
And my question is, besides the neurosurgeons, what are the support services that we should try and encourage our young people, the careers to go into to support people in those years that they're going to need help?
Well, I don't really know the answer to that, except that, people will do what they want to do. I mean, of all the places in the world, we're in the public service place right here, and that's what we're talking about, is people serving the public, and if that's what they want to do, I think they will feel so moved by it. It's the best thing to do. But to have your little kids that are in kindergarten teaching you words like belt buckle, which I couldn't even say, and to have my little 5-year-old daughters teaching me a new word, I thank God they're not really teaching me that many anymore. So thank you all very, very much.
Bob Woodruff.